Good morning from Helsinki. It is Saturday. I have not been keeping up with my video schedule as I had been previously in most of the last month. Um, I had various appointments at offices, networking, and writing and editing. I'm editing a big piece I'm really excited about white truffle season in the Piemonte and the Barolo wine, my favorite region of Italy, the Langhe Hills. I keep promising that I'm going to get it out, and then I start writing and editing, and I think of a story or a person or an insight, or I think of a new way to describe something that I've written, and I just can't get it done. And it's like, it will get done when it gets done, but it has to be done this week. Which leads into what I wanted to talk about today, which is the concept of time, which has been something that has preoccupied me a lot. Just the philosophy, the concept of time, how different cultures perceived it, what has changed our perception of time, and how, just in the course of your own life, certain times, shouldn't have used that word, certain contexts, certain places you've been, certain activities, certain times, I did it again, certain stages of your life, you think about time differently or you experience it differently. Let me give you a quick example. I had to go to one of the Helsinki city offices in Kalasatama earlier this week. And so somebody had told me, well, the office is open, I think 9 to 4 or whatever, 8:30 to 4, whatever. So I got there after 9 a.m. and I get there and there's a lot of people getting their tickets on the little touch screens there. And for the service I was looking for, it was grayed out. The button was grayed out, and I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do it, because I knew I was in the right place. And then I talked to the nice woman at the info desk, and she tells me, oh, well, those appointments aren't available until 10 a.m. And so I said, oh, well, I'm going to have to come back at 10 a.m. Okay, because I'd scheduled my time. The person who told me to go to this office apparently didn't know that the certain appointments that I needed, you can't request them until 10 a.m. Even though there's all kinds of other people doing other things. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, because then I had somewhere I needed to be after that. And so as someone who has been graced with the ability to not wake up to an alarm, to not have a set schedule for much of his life, I can explain more of that in another video. But I realize I have had a different concept of time, that I've not been ground to the clock like I was in like the industrial mill schools of America way back then, or other times in my life. You know, I've had corporate jobs and things like that where I was on, you know, you had to have your calendar, and schedule things, and and you had to be, I've lived that life too, but I've also lived a life where I had a lot of control over the flow of my days. But I'm only saying that because I acutely notice how you approach time in these different contexts, and how it either runs you, or you have control over it, or you are in a flow state with it, and you're not constantly checking your device or your watch or and still things flow. And I like being in that state where I don't have to consciously think about, if I have this appointment, then I have that appointment, I have to be there. I don't have to write it down. I don't have to. I know it, and I flow with it, and I don't have to be obsessed. But my big point of doing this video is talking about WG Sebald, who had major, even more preoccupation with time, and also with walking, and walking without destination, and walking without a path, a predetermined path, just like I did, and that's why I love WG Sebald. But looping back to my appointment at the office in Helsinki, all I wanted to say about that is that this perception of time, it changed when I had in my mind, when I woke up that morning, I walked 40 minutes to this office. I thought I would be able, I figured I would have to wait, get a number, wait, but I didn't know, I had no idea that they had this precise block of time where you could get the appointment I needed. And so here I am. The woman says, well, you're going to have to come back at 10. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I could either wait there, which, I mean, it was pleasant enough. It's a new building. They had some nice, comfy couches and chairs you could have sat on. But, yeah, I wanted to get my business done there. And so I was like, I want to leave this space. I want to just walk around because I hadn't spent much time in this particular neighborhood. There was a lot of new building, new construction there. And I could get a coffee somewhere. Like in Finland, there's always lisää coffee. Always more coffee. There's always, all day long, you drink coffee, 10 cups minimum, or something like that. But, so, I felt this interruption, and I also noted that when something like that happens, all of a sudden, it changes your perception of time. Not only are you not in control of it, you're acutely aware that you're not in control of your schedule or your time, but then I was left with like 35 or so minutes where I didn't know what to do. And those stretches of time, when you have this unexpected little block of time, always seems to go so slowly because you had an idea in mind of what you were going to do, and then it changed through nothing, and you have no control over it. But anyway, so I mean, I'm fine. I can go drink coffee. I can walk around, see a neighborhood that I'm not so familiar with that has a lot of new construction, whatever. So there's this shopping mall across the street. I walked around. Not too exciting, but anyway. So. But the time, because I was consciously aware of the clock, because it was like, well, I want to get back right at 10 because I have a follow-up appointment in a slightly different part of town that I need to make sure I'm on time for. And now my day is, there's a little more pressure. There's a little more pressure because I got to get this appointment done. So I want to be there right at 10 so I can get the first number and not have to wait behind other people who may need the same things I do. And so I get back, and I get back probably at about 9:58. And so I see the woman who had helped me earlier, and I said, hello. And she's like, well, you have to wait until 10 on the dot because that button doesn't appear on the screen until right at 10. And so we're sitting there or standing there looking at the screen and it says 9:59. It's like, okay, well, we're almost there. And then it's like the longest minute. It's like trying to watch a pot of water boil. It's like, it's not happening. And yet, when I'm writing and editing, which I normally am doing during the day at the OOD library or another library, I can be in this flow state. I can be working very, very hard, intensely, going between the screen, paper, book, my notebooks, my Sebaldane, my discombobulated mass of interrelated or non-related writings. Anyway, 3 hours can go by and you swear it was just 15 minutes. I love that. I love that time. It can happen in meditation too, or being in nature, where you're just not aware of this big block of time disappearing, and you were fully engaged in something, whether it be a quiet thing, whether it be something more athletic, where it'd be something in your mind, like writing and editing. And yet here I am, I'm staring at this screen, waiting for it to change from 9:59 to 10 a.m. And it's just, and it feels like it's never going to get there. And so it eventually did, and I was first in line, and everything flowed nicely from that day. But I had this little rupture in the day, and I love that about WG Sebald. That's what first attracted me to him. Well, it wasn't just the time thing. It was Rings of Saturn, which, if you haven't read, will blow the top of your head off in the best possible way. It'll just open you up to new. It just puts you in a different realm, a different world, and it makes you reconsider a lot about yourself and your own experience. Like a lot of Sebald, like sometimes you don't know if he's talking about a real character, something that actually happened to him, or it's all made up. And there's a percentage. So his books aren't properly memoir, they're not properly fiction. He has a poetic soul. He has a very distinctive way of writing. He likes his long sentences. And it can seem slow moving, and then all of a sudden, but you're just wrapped up in this whole universe that he created. A lot of that has to do with his obsession with time, but also walking. And so I loved Rings of Saturn because it's mainly this guy taking a long walk without a destination, without a plan. It's in nature, mostly on a trail, but he sees things, or things occur to him along the way from his past memories, and he'll see a connection between disparate parts of his life, or people, or objects, or places, and it sparks all these new trains of thought. But I loved it because I had not seen depicted in fiction somebody who had the same thoughts about walking, the same philosophy of walking. I'm the world's #1 walking enthusiast, urban, nature, mountain, you name it. I walk as much as I can every day. Let's just put it that way. And I never have a route in mind. I never have a time in mind unless I have to. Like on the day that I was, going between offices, but I'd planned it out and made sure that I could do those walks instead of taking public transportation. But Sebald, his ideas of time is like layered. It can be simultaneous. It can be artificial. And he has this lovely, I already read a large chunk of this in another video, but when he talks about this character Austerlitz, and he says, I have never owned a clock of any kind, a bedside alarm, or a pocket watch, let alone a wristwatch. A clock has always struck me as something ridiculous, a thoroughly mendacious object. Perhaps because I've always resisted the power of time out of some internal compulsion which I myself have never understood, keeping myself apart from so-called current events in the hope, as I now think, said Austerlitz, that time will not pass away, has not passed away, that I can turn back and go behind it, and there I shall find everything as it once was, or more precisely, I shall find that all the moments of time have coexisted simultaneously, in which case none of what history tells us would be true. Past events have not yet occurred, but are waiting to do so at the moment when we think of them, although that, of course, opens up the bleak prospect of everlasting misery and never-ending anguish. He always, he's a little bit of a catastrophizer. He's a little bit of a, what would you say? A deep melancholic guy, but his but I love the way he flows in the narrative, and it just goes with walking. I often feel I'm in those trains of thoughts when walking. And in another place, he said that we're all very, very ridiculous. We barely learn how to exist in this world and be happy and then it's snatched away from us. And that literally happened to him. I mean, he wrote that before he died in the car accident in 2001. And I remember exactly where I was sitting, reading the New York Times, finding out that this guy, his book had just come out, the one I just read from Austerlitz. I had seen him in Seattle at the Pioneer Square bookshop. That's no longer there. And it was a shock because it was it was a Sebald moment. It was an exact Sebald moment. Sitting there reading the newspaper, he just signed my book 6 weeks ago. I just heard him read, and then he died in this kind of mysterious car accident in his adopted home near Norwich, UK. But I like, it's just like this strange, just all these conjunctions that happen of him between history, personal history, world history, walking, thinking, philosophizing, recombining past events, people, places in your head, and then all of a sudden seeing the coincidences and the spark and this and the new insights that come, and that can only come when you have a calmness and a centeredness, and where you are outside time, and so where clocks don't make sense, as he says in that one piece. And then he also, in another part, talks about how, if Newton really thought that time was a river like the Thames, then where is its source, and at which sea does it finally flow? Every river, as we know, must have banks on both sides. So where then, seen in those terms, where are the banks of time? Another just gorgeous idea that he has of thinking of time in a physical way, or actually as part of nature, because time in its physical manifestation, as he says, I believe in another book, is that the clock was the key machine of the industrial age, not the steam engine, because of how it just fixed that just very specific linear idea in everyone's head, and that everything could be calculated, scaled down to the minute or second or whatever, and that people got run by it. And then everyone had, at their homes, on themselves, but it was just like that was the real key machine of the industrial age. I don't think he said it exactly that way, but it kind of is. And then, so he has this way of, finding your way in a forgotten history or through childhood trauma, which is another theme that I've been playing with after I had, this kind of awakening, reimagining in nature this summer in Sweden, is also connects to WG Sebald in the way he talks about, especially this one character, that it is. It's just your past, your childhood trauma. That is one way of how time can be disrupted, and that as I said in other contexts, it's also the cave you dare to enter, where all the treasures are, and it's also the source of your real power, creativity, vitality, dynamism, and you don't think it is. A lot of people hold on to it, hold on to their trauma or their difference, or however you want to phrase it. But it all stems from childhood, and if you don't deal with it, it keeps popping up, and it keeps affecting your life until you fully confront it. And I'm working on ways of, in a hopefully fun way, of describing that more fully and exactly. But it's already appeared in some of my writings, and then I like how he essentially says that through his writings, that is one of the key. If you think of life as it's a school, the school of life, that's one of the key things we have to learn, and a lot of people deny it, or they try to downplay it, and that is one thing. But it is, and I think that's true, and that's something you can get out of Sebald, is that it is those childhood memories, or they're often the traumatic ones, that change our whole concept of our time and how we configure our own narrative, if you think of life as narrative. Not everyone does. But how it disrupts our sense of time. And so you have all these different pathways to thinking about it. But I like to think of time as a walk, and that I take a walk without thinking about a certain time, without thinking about a certain path, without thinking about what problems I might resolve, or what new work or project might spark from it, or I might reconfigure something that I'm working on, like my truffle story. But it also, those are some of the most happy moments of my life, when taking a walk, not at all paying attention to the time, but also knowing that I've got to work on these things. At the same time, I can't just walk 8 hours a day. 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours sometimes. But then it just kind of resolves itself, both the walk and the work that you're processing in your head. And then you get back, you take a little break, and then you're ready to and then you're ready to work, and you can work so much quicker. The associations fire faster, and I can edit so much faster after that. So you think about, oh well, you just took 3 hours walking. Well, yeah, but it was like the act, the physical act, the perceptions that I had, as well as the new insights I gained, allowed me to work so much more quicker. I could have spent that whole time sitting at my computer trying to write, and I wouldn't have gotten anywhere near as much done. That's one way I think about time. And also, I love his way he talks about walking across London, and that you can walk all the way across in one night. And I've done that in Montreal. Nobody believes me, but Montreal was actually, Helsinki was before that. I walked every block of the city limits of Helsinki. Nobody believes me about that either. One summer in the early 90s, but Montreal, I was in 95, and I walked and I walked and I walked and I walked. Sometimes I walked all night long. I once ran smack into a Hasidic Jew at night. I don't know what he was doing out in that park, but it was pitch black, like there weren't any street lights around that, and he of course was dressed in all black, and we ran into each other. That was one of my most memorable walks, urban walks. But this idea, like I would constantly think about that. You could walk from that iconic observation tower at Olympic Stadium, and where the botanical gardens. I've walked all the way back through East into Westmount in one day, or I've walked through countless neighborhoods in a night. But he says something like that here, where he says, I would leave my house as darkness fell, walking on and on down the Mile End Road and Bow Road to Stratford, then to Chigwell and Romford, right across Bethnal Green and Canonbury through Holloway and Kentish Town, and thus to Hampstead Heath, or else south over the river to Peckham in Dulwich, or westward to Richmond Park. It is a fact that you can traverse this vast city almost from end to end on foot in a single night, said Austerlitz, and once you are used to walking alone and meeting only a few nocturnal specters on your way, you soon begin to wonder why, apparently because of some agreement concluded long ago, Londoners of all ages lie in their beds in those countless buildings in Greenwich, Bayswater, or Kensington under a safe roof, as they suppose, while really they're only stretched out with their faces turned to the earth in fear, like travelers of the past resting on their way through the desert. Again, he takes things sometimes to extremes, like just as extended thoughts. But I love that. I love that imagery, and I love the way he thinks about times. Like you can walk from one end of London to the other in a day, or in the course of a night, almost. And most people would say, well, why would anyone do that? And someone like me would say, I want to see if I can do it. Like when I was in Athens once, I followed almost exactly, or as well as we know. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of, like the original marathon back into Athens. Went through some interesting neighborhoods, stopped for some drink and smoke breaks, which led to some very interesting encounters. But you know, when I hear about something like that, or I think of something like that, or I read something that inspires me to do something, I just go for it. And I've been so lucky that I've been able to do these types of things all over the world. But the point of this was, and I talked about my appointment in Helsinki. I talked about various ways that could lead you into this discussion of what is time, what is man's concept of time, how has it changed over the centuries. It's like clocks control, compress, commodify. And to get to the greater humanity, to get to creativity, connection, work, pleasure, and higher states of consciousness, let's just say, it helps to not be burdened by the clock. But it's also, everything is like flip can also be true. When you lose that idea, you can go days and days and days where you're not consciously thinking about it or looking for what is the time now, how much time do I have left, and it connects with what I was doing with the Hafez in Robert Bly's translation, where he's withdrawing all your obsessions with gotta get this done, and your ways of thinking too rigidly about the things you gotta do during the day, or what your overall purpose or goal is. And then that lovely poem that I did, it's a couple of videos back, my Hafez piece. When you find Hafez, it's a joy forever. I think I titled it something like that, but it's that same idea. It's that same idea of when you lose that preoccupation, obsession, that's mechanistic need, it actually kind of embeds itself in you, and you can have a busy day of appointments, and you can flow between them without consciously worrying about it, or be like, oh, I got to finish this up in 3 minutes so I can do this, that sort of thing. So those are the things I'm thinking about in time. And oddly, this is wrapping up 29, 54, 55, 56, and I'm just going to leave it there right at about a half an hour. I don't know if anyone watched to the end, but bless you and thank you so much. And I hope you have great journeys. I hope you think about these concepts of time differently and read WG Sebald. I pick up his books and I just will go to a random page and I'm just transformed. Well, yeah, I am transformed, but I'm like taken to his world, and his universe was beautiful, a little bit pretentious at times, maybe a little bit old-fashioned in his language at times and the way he formed his sentences, but it eventually just pulls you in, and you're floating through your own journey of time and space and your own personal history, and it's like you think of your own associations and connections as he's going through his own, and he comes up with all these startling relations between times in his life, people, places, objects, images, and it's a journey well worth taking. And again, I was going to end right at 30, but now we're at 31, 32. So I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much, and I'm going to pick up probably on Sebald again another day because I often do. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day, a great journey, and I wish you well in your work and whatever you find joy in. Thank you so much. Bye.